Hello there, and welcome to our presentation. Today we're going to be talking about three extraordinary men, one being Ronald Ross, another Walter Reed, and finally my favorite, Carlos Chagas.
All of these men were integral to the development of microbiology. Each one researched and studied the transmission of diseases that have been destructive to this world. Because of their research, technology and medicine have been able to go further in treating diseases such as malaria, yellow fever, and Chagas disease.
Ronald Ross was born on May 13, 1857, in Almora, India. As a young boy, Ross's father wanted him to study medicine. So in 1875, he moved to London to study at St. Bartholomew's Hospital. In 1881, Ross entered the Indian Medical Service. It was there when he met Patrick Manson, the father of tropical medicine. Manson believed that malaria parasites were in the bloodstream. In 1899, Ross resigned from the Indian Medical Service and joined the Liverpool School of Tropical Medicine. It was there where he was sent to West Africa to continue his investigation, and he eventually became a professor and taught. During his active career, Ross's main focus was on the prevention of malaria. Later on in his life, he made a book named The Prevention of Malaria in 1911 and a number of other novels. After 2.5 years of failure, Ross succeeded in demonstrating the life cycle of the parasites of malaria. He received a Nobel Prize given an honorary membership of the Learned Society of most European countries, and he died on September 16, 1932. Now the question was, how did the malaria parasite get there? From here, Ronald Ross began his investigation to try to prove Manson's hypothesis that mosquitoes were related to the transmission of malaria. On August 20, 1897, Ross made his big discovery while dissecting the stomach tissue of a mosquito that had fed 4 days previously on the patient who had malaria. From there, Ross went on to prove mosquitoes' role in the transmission.
The malaria infection begins when an infected Anopheles mosquito bites a person, injecting sporozoites into the bloodstream. The sporozoites pass quickly into the liver. There, they will multiply asexually. Merozoites are released from the liver and invade red blood cells. Here, they will sexually reproduce, and they are now called gametocytes. Then another mosquito will come along and bite an infected human, and it will ingest the gametocytes, which mature into sex cells called gametes. The fertilized female gametes develop into oocytes and form oocysts. Inside of the oocysts, thousands of active sporozoites develop. The cycle of human infection begins again when the mosquito bites another person. Ronald Ross's impact on today is that we now know that malaria can be transmitted through blood found in mosquitoes. We also know that we need to be cautious of mosquitoes around the equator. There are a few ways that we can prevent getting malaria. One of these ways is through mosquito nets, which prevent the mosquitoes from biting someone in a at-risk area. There is also medicine that a person can take before they travel in order to prevent getting malaria.
Walter Reed was born on September 13, 1851, then died in 1902 at age 51 from peritonitis, which is the inflammation of the peritoneum, which is the tissue that lines the inner wall of the abdomen. Yellow fever is an acute viral disease that is transmitted by the bite of a mosquito. The yellow in the name refers to the jaundiced skin that the disease may cause. Symptoms of yellow fever may include a headache, vomiting, jaundice, or muscle pain specifically in the back or knees, and sensitivity to light that is very similar to flu-like symptoms. Walter Reed discovered the causative agent that caused an outbreak of yellow fever, which occurred in the United States garrison in Havana. A commission was actually appointed to investigate this outbreak. The commission consisted of Reed, who acted as chairman, along with 3 of Reed's colleagues. On August 27, 1900, an infected mosquito was allowed to feed on Carroll, who was a member of the commission. Carroll developed a severe attack of yellow fever. Shortly afterward, Lazier was also bitten. He developed yellow fever and then died. In November of 1900, a small hutted camp was established and controlled experiments that were performed on volunteers. In all 22 cases of experimentation, yellow fever was produced while having a total of 14 mosquito bites, 16 injections of blood, and 2 injections of filtered blood serum. The filtered blood serum is used to actually detect the virus-specific IgM antibodies. Sometimes the virus can be found in blood samples taken early in the illness rather than later. Reed proved that an attack of yellow fever was caused by the bite of an infected mosquito. He also discovered that the same result could be obtained by injecting into a volunteer blood drawn from a patient that was suffering from yellow fever. Did someone say fix the problem? Well, Walter Reed did not fix the problem. He died. But he did lead experiments that proved the causative agent of this parasitic disease was a mosquito. He was able to differentiate between what most thought was malaria into what was proven to be yellow fever. Reed also found no evidence that yellow fever could be conveyed by physical objects. He was able to prove this hypothesis by showing a house that had become infected by the presence of these specifically infected mosquitoes. Reed's work fits together by the way that he went about his studies. First, he discovered that the problem had originally stemmed from multiple infected mosquitoes. Then he devoted all of his time trying to find a solution to this epidemic. Each one of his experiments allowed him to move forward in his journey to finding either a cure or a way to prevent the spread of this disease. Reed's work impacted the science of disease by raising awareness of mosquitoes as well as other insects as being the host for these life-threatening diseases. Scientists are now able to infect mosquitoes and understand that particular life cycle, as well as being able to construct studies to better protect our society from such diseases. Reed's work is still used today to prevent another outbreak of yellow fever.
Carlos Chagas was born in Oliveira, Brazil on July 9, 1879. He obtained his MD and then went to study at the Oswaldo Cruz Institute under the guidance of Oswaldo Cruz. During his time there, he researched malaria and actually wrote his thesis on it entitled Hematological Aspects of Malaria. He later became an associate of the Oswaldo Cruz Institute. During this time, Brazil was experiencing economic distress due to malaria, yellow fever, and smallpox. People didn't want to dock their ships there because their workers were dying. While Chagas was researching at the institute, he got offered a job to move to Lassance. In Lassance, railroad workers were dying due to malaria and other unknown diseases. So Chagas moved to Lassance to investigate, and he set up a clinic in a railway car. They thought the railroad workers were dying of malaria, but they were experiencing other symptoms such as cardiac problems, which are not caused by malaria. Chagas discovered an insect which we now call the triatomine bug. Railroad workers were very familiar with these bugs, unlike the other cities in Brazil. He put 2 and 2 together and realized these bugs were causing these people in Lassance to die. He investigated the gut within this insect and discovered a protozoan that was causing the disease and named it after his mentor, which is now called T. Cruz. He continued his experiments with animals that had also been bitten, discovering how exactly this disease is transmitted and its disease process. He analyzed the symptoms by a cat that had been bitten several times. Unfortunately, the same house that the cat lived in had a 3-year-old girl who was also bitten severely and died. She was the first microbiologically documented case.
Here's a quick video to show how the triatamine bug spreads Chagas.
This caused a huge impact on Brazil in terms of social justice and public health. This brought to light the clear line between the upper class and the lower class and the government's responsibility to public health. In 1918, the sanitation movement took place with Chagas as one of the leaders. In 1920, the National Department of Public Health was established with Chagas being the first director. This changed Brazil for the better, bringing protection in the form of sanitation throughout all of Brazil. Chagas' discoveries helped many people become safer and more proactive towards their health. Chagas' work still impacts society today by showing not only the importance of sanitation, but that all people deserve adequate sanitation regardless of wealth status.
In conclusion, it is important to understand that each of these microbiologists have substantially impacted the world that we live in today. Ronald Ross discovered many preventions of malaria. After undergoing 2.5 years of failure, Ross succeeded in demonstrating the life cycle of the parasites of malaria. Carlos Chagas not only showed the importance of sanitation, but also highlighted the importance of socialization. Chagas studied and experimented in Brazil, but later his knowledge was known in many other parts of the world. Walter Reed was an army pathologist and a bacteriologist who led experiments that were able to prove his hypothesis that yellow fever is transmitted by a mosquito. An interesting fact about the name of the disease is that yellow from yellow fever was thought of after it was discovered that the disease caused jaundice. Reed was unable to successfully find a cure before his death in 1902, but he did establish a camp where experiments proceeded after he was deceased. Due to these specific scientists' contributions, we are able to use their research to emphasize the importance of parasitic diseases. Knowing how important these diseases are, we are now also able to use the research conducted to better treat each one of these illnesses.
for watching our presentation. I hope you enjoyed all that grateful information about Ronald Ross, Walter Reed, and Carlos Chagas.